Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto anime review. This one's going to be for episode 199 called, I think this one's called Exceeding the Limits or, I think so anyway, that's what the manga chapter is called. So yeah, what we got here was the ending of the Naruto and Delta fight, and then we also got some anime sort of original content here, covering what Boro has been up to. So this was set up a few episodes ago that Amado sent code out to bring Boro back to find, to get maintenance on him so that they could judge whether he is the one leaking information, he's the kind of Kara traitor or not. Now, that's going to be interesting in that it looks like they're going to eventually go into a bit of an arc about Boro to explain what just happened here more. But based on the preview, it looks like they're going to cover the next, I'd say two chapters, maybe minus one of the side plots from the manga over the next few episodes, and then go into it. And I think that's probably a good place to just kind of create a little bit of a kind of separation, because once we get going after this, into volume 10, 11, everything is just boom, boom, boom. We're basically into, here are some of the major reveals about what Kara is about, finally knowing what their kind of plan is, what the deal is with Jigen and so on. So they need to kind of find a gap to do some of this content, because we are going to be having some of the biggest fights in the entire series coming up sooner rather than later, and I think that helps to explain why this fight was not really given the super special deluxe animation treatment. They did a solid job, sort of above average, but they didn't go further than they needed to, and I think this episode especially highlighted that, yeah, choreography-wise, there's not a lot going on in this fight. Just the way it works from a sort of plot perspective, it's not the most interesting because, jutsu, because of Delta being able to absorb stuff, it forces the fight to be mostly taijutsu, which is always cool to see animated, and they did more of that here. I was a little let down, though, by the fact that, even in the previous episode, they had Delta consistently using her body modifications in combination with her taijutsu to make the fight a little bit more interesting. But it felt like, even though this was meant to be they are both angry and really serious, it felt like the fight went down a notch rather than up a notch with that taijutsu. In that, okay, Naruto's angrier, that's fine, but Delta suddenly stops using the sort of body modifications where she's able to make spikes pop out of her legs and stuff like that. She just fights normally and doesn't really use her abilities, and then suddenly once the taijutsu sequence is over, then she's like, okay, I'm going to draw Naruto in and finish him off with my laser beams. So that was fine. And then the finish obviously is just big, it's just Rasengan into big Rasengan into supermassive Rasengan, and that's really it. The whole tactic here was basically overload Delta's jutsu absorption with raw chakra power and basically make it so that ability doesn't function anymore because she's absorbed way too much. It's clever, it's meant to get across that Naruto's angry and it's just pumping energy in consistently, and it works. I think the problem is just that, okay, I get it, Naruto in general as a series, Boruto as a series, it's always going to want to use Rasengan or some form of Rasengan as the big finishing blow, but for Naruto to accomplish the just, overloading Delta, I think there's a lot of jutsu he had in his arsenal that he could have done, in that I think just to make it a little bit more interesting, I would have liked maybe something like a kind of tail beast bomb style thing. That way, that's tail beast power, that's their main attack, that's hugely energetic, and that would have been okay, this makes sense for how he's overwhelming her, and then he finishes her off with the Rasengan afterwards. I would have just liked a little bit more creativity rather than just, okay, it's Naruto, so he always uses the Rasengan. And especially in this fight when the choreography was not anything fancy, in that the only jutsus Naruto used in this fight were Rasengan, Big Rasengan, Supermassive Rasengan, and one random lava shuriken in the previous episode that was not even like important that he used that jutsu. So just from a creativity point of view, I get why they didn't feel like this was the fight to go all out in, because all it would have been is just, okay, taijutsu is even better, and what the visual effects of the Rasengan are going to look even better, and they already looked quite good because on Naruto they're so used to doing the Rasengan effect. So you know, it was cool that they were able to like accomplish as much as they did in this episode while not having the full-on deluxe animation. But they were definitely helped by the way the fight actually goes, which is pretty much just that it's taijutsu and then into just Rasengan effects. And that's really all there is. There was no real, I think, moment where, yes, they should have had amazing animation there to make this moment really, really shine. Just because they didn't have many, I think, really unique sequences in the fight. So the end of the fight is fine in that, like, what I liked about this fight is that I do like that you do honestly get to see Naruto sort of emotional and serious, angry in this stage of the fight. That they got across that, like, okay, they're both sort of, you know, swinging for the fences here with their attacks, and that Naruto is prepared to take Delta out here. But then afterward, they reveal that, oh yeah, she should still be alive, even though I hit her with this giant Rasengan. But she obviously self-destructs, and Naruto has to save everyone again. But that's more or less where we leave off that moment, is that once it's done with, Naruto, you know, deactivates his chakra mode, and he's, you know, exhausted a bit after the fight, but he still seems like okay. So he had to sort of push himself a little bit, but not too much. So it's a weird one, you know, in terms of, like, anyone who knows what Naruto's full skill set is kind of like, wow, okay, this was a very limiting fight for him, but he still won comfortably enough in the end. So is there really a problem? And it's more of just, this fight could have been more creative, and it just ended up being okay. But there are better fights, there are more important fights coming up, and I think that's where they will devote their attention in terms of the big animation episodes. So I'm glad they didn't, I think, in my mind, needlessly put the time and effort into this one when they didn't really need to. So with that out of the way, you know, because what this episode covered was basically chapter 33 and then like a couple of pages from the very start of chapter 34. Just to basically show the explosion, and then Kashin Koji just noting that, you know, Naruto, you're so powerful, but you'll need more than that to take Jigen down, and that karma is going to be like key going forward. So it's only like, you know, an eighth of the chapter. So they still have, you know, this many pages of the volume left to cover from volume 9. And chapter 34 is what looks to be what most of next week is going to be about, but it also looks like they'll kind of maybe flesh it out a little bit more, and that's going to be exciting. And then chapter 35 is obviously where things get really, really interesting, and I'm very excited to see, will they present some of the 35 stuff to us in the next episode or two, or will they hold that off until after they do this Boro and his religious cult situation that's coming up, which obviously leads us into the Boro scene that we got in the episode, which was very intriguing, because I'll definitely say that even though Boro has a big fight coming up, and he sort of gets to be sort of in the focus kind of next in Kara, he's not a particularly interesting character, or they don't give him enough time to really stand out as an interesting character. That's probably the better way to say it. So he definitely needs one of these anime arcs to, you know, act as a sort of prequel to his actual kind of focus in the main story. That way we'll get to know him better and understand, I think, a little bit more about him. going into his kind of big fight. So what we get here is we go to this town that's really struggling. Basically, everyone who lives here is either sick or is going to become sick eventually. The kids, the adults, they're all sick. They also reveal that they struggle to grow crops there. So even if, like, as is pointed out by Boro, like, okay, he heals them, but what sort of a life is this if you just, like, are going to be healed, but you're expected to get sick again or die of hunger or something like that? This is no good life to live, and they don't seem to have any option to go somewhere else or fix this. So Boro basically just comes in and proposes the idea of the infinite Tsukiyomi, which is like, okay, like, even as a manga reader, I'm kind of like, whoa, this is new. Boro mentioned the infinite Tsukiyomi out of nowhere, and I'm kind of thinking, like, I don't want to spoil stuff for people, but, like, is this potentially the first major hint in the anime to properly help to explain what Kara is about? That we've got a previous hint from before, with just, Boruto and the whole Momoshiki thing. That's like one sort of piece of the puzzle. But now we're getting, okay, infinite Tsukiyomi. Okay. And we're, I suppose, potentially over the next few episodes going to get the first major kind of proper reveals about Kara coming up shortly. So is this another part of the puzzle, or is this just some side thing that Boro is doing? Because we know that Kara are doing research into divine trees. We got that from the Victor arc and stuff like that with Deepa. So what is a part of a divine tree? It's that you need people to fuel it. And what way did it happen in Naruto is that it was the infinite Tsukiyomi to kind of put everyone into that, genjutsu kind of dream and live that ideal life. So, that's one way to, like, okay, well, if you want to make a divine tree, you need to fuel it properly. Is that why Boro is interested in the infinite Tsukiyomi? And then the question is obviously, like, wait, is he proposing that he has a way to actually do this himself? That's interesting. Like, can he do it, or what? Or is he doing, like, a fake version of it? It's kind of intriguing what they're going for. But obviously, like, when Code comes in, he's like, how does it feel to be deceiving people? So clearly what Boro's doing is, like, he feels he's doing, charity work here, helping people. But Code literally just tells us that, oh, you're deceiving people again. So what's the situation here? Because he does seem to actually heal the people. Now, there's no visual indication that he does anything. But if you know what Boro's powers are from having read the manga, you might have some sense for what they're going for here, and it's kind of interesting. It's just like a tease of what's happening here. But I'm very interested to see what's going on with the Infinite Tsukiyomi thing. Now, obviously, we don't want to go into the whole, like, Naruto Shippuden, Infinite Tsukiyomi sort of filler style stuff that they had there. That was, not a great run, but, some interesting stuff happened. I don't think that's going to happen here, just because the people that are going under Infinite Tsukiyomi are just these, like, random villagers. So the focus is just going to be like, okay, how? If Infinite Tsukiyomi, how is it going to be used? How does this even come to light? Or is it just like a fake version, like I said? But the mention of it seems to give us just another connection to try and figure out Kara ahead of the big proper reveal. So that's kind of interesting. And then we get one final scene in the episode just with Amado talking to Jigen, just highlighting that they still haven't figured out who the Kara traitor is, who the rat is, but that Amado is going to find out who it is. So that's the main question here. I suppose quickly going back to the Code Boro scene, I did like, in terms of the Code setup here, that Code actually sort of intimidates Boro. He's kind of like, if you don't come back, I'm happy to do it by force. And Boro ends up sort of yielding. Because, of course, in the preview, we see that Boro does go back to Kara headquarters. Which I think is why they're setting up the idea of, we'll come back to Boro. So when he does what he needs to do and he gets his maintenance done by Amado and gets cleared or whatever, he's then going to be able to go back to this town and we'll figure out what's going on, and get that arc with Boro and his cult in this town, and just figure out what he's about. That's kind of interesting to me, that they're creating a sort of gap in terms of an early setup for this, you know, anime original arc. Then we're going to get some manga content. I'm interested to see how much of it we do, because I'm intrigued by the fact that, you know, obviously I don't think it's time yet, and that next episode, if they do it accurately, should be basically the rest of chapter 34. But then the next episode, 201, realistically, I suppose, should be an adaptation of chapter 35, which is very impactful chapter. And it seems like they're going to, for sure, do the sort of Kawaki side of the episode. But are they going to do the other side of the episode with... I won't spoil like any of it, because I think it's such an important section of the manga, but is that coming soon? Or are they going to wait to do that until after they do this Boro arc? That's what I'm intrigued by. But yeah, overall, enjoyable episode. But you know, like I've been saying the whole time, like this Naruto Delta fight was cool for what it was, but it ultimately is not really one of the best fights in Boruto. More is still to come, and this matchup and the way they wrote it just didn't make for, I think, the best content or choreography. But for it being a pretty accurate adaptation, I think they did it quite well. Like I said, the taijutsu was nice, and the visuals on the Rasengan as it got bigger and bigger was quite cool to just see Naruto go all out and defeat a powerful opponent. That was good to see. Obviously, we'll get back to, I suppose, the more character side of things going forward with Kawaki. We'll be come back to the vase, of course. Those are the bigger things at play here. So, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this episode. But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.